This episode is brought to you by Sterling Soap Company. Fellas, you've heard the phrase, look good, feel good, right? But why not add smell good to that too? That's where Sterling Soap Company comes in. First, Sterling Soap is 100% natural and has a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne. Second, there's a scent just for you. How about burgundy? Yeah, it's more than a color. The Sterling Soap folks blend natural essential oils with hints of mahogany, golden amber, and sandalwood. Or how about D503, an intensely masculine scent inspired by Legend by Mont Blanc. And third, you will feel good about the price. For just a little more than you'd pay at the grocery store, Sterling Soap will leave you feeling clean, refreshed, and ready for whatever's next. Give Sterling Soap a try today. Visit sterlingsoap.com.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Darren Hayes, host of the Pigskin Dispatch and Jersey Dispatch podcast. I hope you've enjoyed another great episode here on Sports History Network. Now, speaking of sports history, this episode was brought to you by Firefly Books, and they have two great ones for you this summer. For basketball fans, they have the NBA 75, the definitive history by author Dave Zarum, who's appeared on our Jersey Dispatch podcast recently. He tells about the experience, the thrilling journey of the NBA, from its humble beginnings to its modern glory. Uncover the untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. This isn't just a book, it's courtside seats to over 75 years of NBA history. And for the golf enthusiasts, swing into The Golf Round I'll Never Forget by Matt Adams. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. From Garcia's triumph at the 2017 Masters to Nicklaus' miraculous 1986 comeback, it's the closest you'll get to walking the fairways with golf's greatest. Get your summer read on. Grab a copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available online or at your favorite bookstore.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
When researching subject matter for sports forgotten heroes, sometimes you scratch your head and say, how did I not know that? Or how did I never hear about this guy? On this episode of Sports Forgotten Heroes, we're going to take a look back at a truly remarkable career, the Major League Baseball and National Football League careers of Charlie Berry.
This is Sports Forgotten Heroes, a tribute to the stars who shaped the games we love to watch and the games we love to play. Stars who provided us with many thrills, but when their time was up, they faded away. We'll take a look back at their spectacular careers, their moments of fame, even if it was just for one season or just one game. And now, here's your host, Warren Rogan.
Hello and welcome to Sports Forgotten Heroes, episode number 159, Charlie Berry. His career was truly remarkable. When you look back at the history of sports, there really isn't anyone who can compare to Charlie. Yes, Cal Hubbard is pretty well known for being an NFL official and a Major League Baseball umpire, to go along with the fact that he has been enshrined in both the Pro Football Hall of Fame and the Baseball Hall of Fame. But no one has ever played in a Major League Baseball game, a National Football League game, and later worked as a Major League Baseball umpire and as an official in NFL games. That is, no one with the exception of Charlie Berry. Not only that, Charlie Berry officiated college football games. He did play in the majors for 11 years. He played 2 years in the NFL and was a part of the 1925 Pottsville Maroons, the team that won the NFL championship that year before it was stripped away from them. He was a part of the umpiring crew for Don Larson's perfect game in the 1956 World Series. He was the head linesman in the 1958 NFL championship game between the New York Giants and the Baltimore Colts, the game that is commonly known as the greatest game ever played. Yes, Charlie Berry certainly holds a very unique spot in sports history, And on today's show, my guest, Jeffrey Payne, and I will discuss the terrific career of Charlie Berry. Before we do, however, a few reminders. Please follow on X at Sports F Heroes. Look for our page on Facebook, and wherever it is you are listening, please follow, rate, and review. You can also reach out to me, sportsfh.info@gmail.com. That's right, send me an email, sportsfh.info@gmail.com. Questions, comments, if you have an idea for a show. And as always, I thank you for your support. Okay, let's get into today's show about Charlie Berry with my guest, Jeff Payne. Jeff, welcome back to Sports Forgotten Heroes. So glad you agreed to appear yet again.
Glad to be back, Warren. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Certainly a very interesting topic, and we mentioned this gentleman's name on the previous episode, and you were a part of that when we talked about the Pottsville Maroons. And today we're talking about Charlie Berry. So I guess my first question to you is, well, I guess as a sports historian, I understand why, but what is it about Charlie Berry that interests you so much?
In the book we wrote called Marooned on the Pottsville Maroons, I called him the All-American Boy. Like, I love reading about the history of people and their accomplishments and where they came from and what they did in their life. And I got to tell you, when I read Charlie Berry's bio, and you just look from, all the way from high school through, very late in life, his accomplishments are incredible. It doesn't matter what your profession is, to have somebody that accomplished in anything is just amazing. And I just found that, he's the all-American boy. He could be a comic book, right? Every step of the way, he shined. So I love stories like that.
Well, on this podcast, I have spoken about several two-sport athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And Charlie Berry, obviously, is a two-sport athlete,
Yep.
Major League Baseball and the National Football League.
Mm-hmm.
But what makes him even more unique than just being a two-sport athlete is the fact that he officiated in both sports.
Yeah.
And not just from a periphery. This guy had significant accomplishments as an official in both sports.
He did.
On Larson's perfect game. It doesn't get much bigger than that. And incredibly, the greatest game ever played, right? The game we all call the greatest game ever played in the history of the National Football League, the championship game between the New York Giants and Baltimore Colts. When you think about this, he was a really good baseball player. A career batting average of .267, playing for the Red Sox and the White Sox and the Philadelphia Athletics, and not just for a cup of tea. He was up in Major League Baseball for 11 years. And then, of course, the fact that he was a part of the 1925 Pottsville Maroons, the team that should be recognized as the champions of the NFL. What this guy has done, or what he did, is incredible. So how would you place Charlie Berry's early years within the broader context of American sports in the early 1900s?
Well, back then you do read a lot about multi-sport athletes before professional, right? High school, college, you see a lot more of those than pros. But his accomplishments before he went pro are equally incredible. I mean, he grew up. I mean, his dad was a baseball player. You know, he played in the, it was called the Union Association in the 1880s. It was a rival league to the, National League. Very briefly, played for 1 year. So clearly his dad was interested in athletics, settled down in New Jersey and got a job as a machinist and had some kids. And Charlie was his only son. And Charlie once said that he had a baseball mitt in his hand from the time he could hold it. So his dad clearly was, wanted him to play sports, wanted him to play ball. And talk about playing. I mean, he had, it was 11 varsity letters in high school. So he was, football, basketball, baseball, team captain of all three of those sports in high school, led his football team to the state championship. I mean, how do you get more than that out of high school? Then he goes to college, plays two sports, team captain of both of those teams, wins 8 letters. So he was a starter for both the football and baseball team as a freshman. And he was also...
This was at
Lafayette. This was at Lafayette College.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's 2 miles from his house. You asked about his upbringing and stuff like that. There's not a huge amount that I've found about his upbringing, but he went to college 2 miles from his house. He played baseball less than 15 minutes from his parents' house. He played football less than an hour from his parents' house. I would say he's pretty close to his family. He spent most of his life in New Jersey, lived in New Jersey next to his parents. So, yeah, I mean, he didn't venture very far unless he got traded or, he did move around in baseball, as you mentioned, by trades. But, I would say he was very connected to his family. But he was also class president at Lafayette and graduated with an economics degree. So obviously a smart kid. Just everything about him just reeks all-American boy growing up.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah.
All-American boy. So you said that, he had a mitt in his hand from the time he could wear a mitt, right?
Yeah.
How did he train? How did he become so adept at both sports? And yeah, I guess earlier in the 1900s, there were more two-sport stars than as time has progressed. But you still had to be pretty darn good at one.
Yeah.
He was great at 2. Where did that come from?
3 in high school. I think some of it was from his dad, natural ability. His dad also, I mentioned he was a machinist. He worked at a company called Ingersoll Rand. They're still around. He said that they may have merged, but it's a pretty large company. And Ingersoll Rand had a baseball team, right? Like a lot of corporations did. They played in what was called the Industrial League when Charlie was growing up. And Charlie played on that team when he was still in high school. So he was playing with, adults in high school playing baseball. Football, not so sure, other than, he was clearly a natural at football. I mean, I've often said if he had played more than a couple years in the NFL, there's no doubt he would have been in the NFL Hall of Fame. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame. And football seemed to be like the thing he just did for, off season for baseball, he was a natural athlete and a natural at the end position. He was fast. He was shifty. He had great hands, obviously hand-eye coordination from baseball, just a great athlete and just excelled at football on the field.
Well, I would think that back then in the 1920s, if you had a choice between playing baseball and playing football, if you had to choose, I think you would choose baseball just based off of how well organized at that time, comparatively speaking, Major League Baseball was to the National Football League, especially when you go back and you consider all that happened with the Pottsville Maroons. Nothing like that really ever happened in baseball outside of the Black Sox scandal. Tell me about Charlie as a baseball player, as a catcher. What kind of a ball player was he?
He wasn't a superstar. He played most of his seasons for, as you mentioned, the Philadelphia A's. Connie Mack was a huge Charlie Berry fan. And you can see it, right? I mean, you've got a natural-born leader, a natural-born winner, a natural-born athlete, very personable. One thing about Charlie late in life is he was on the speaking circuit. He used to give a lot of talks at banquets and things because, he told great stories. He was very personable and fun to talk to. And I feel like Connie Mack really took him under his wing. Now, they did trade him away after he broke his wrist. Some speculate that the A's were worried that his wrist would never really recover. And they did trade him, but he ended up back with Philly. They traded, a few years later to get him back. And then, Connie Mack set him up as a manager. I think Connie Mack really wanted him to go into coaching. You mentioned football versus baseball. After Barry played in the NFL for a couple of years, he decided he didn't want to play football any longer. But he stayed in football. He coached football. He went, after baseball season was over, he spent 5 years as a college coach at Grove City, which is in the western side of PA. And of course, right, of those 5 years, they won the championship 3 years of the 5. And, he was like 30-7 over 5 years as a coach. I mean, everything he touched was turned to gold. And then he kind of moved away from that after 5 years. But, he stayed engaged with both sports throughout his whole life, really.
What I'm curious to know is, and I don't know if you can answer this question. He started off with the Philadelphia Athletics in 1925, played for the Pottsville Maroons in 1925. In 1926, he played for the Maroons as well. Yep. And that was the end of his football career. He only played those 2 seasons, if I follow correctly. He did not play Major League Baseball in 26. He did not play Major League Baseball in 27. He came back in 1928 with the Red Sox. What was he doing in 1927? Because he wasn't in either league.
He was in the minors. So he only played 10 games so he was picked up by the A's right after graduation in 1924. And as a catcher, and went right to the majors. His first game he played, he came in, actually, the A's were getting killed. They were losing by like 10 runs. I guess Connie Mack figures, let's put the kid in, let's see what he's got. And what I heard was he threw first throw, he threw it into, he tried to pick somebody off and he made an error. He threw it into center field. I'm sure Connie Mack was like, oh, here we go. You got the kid out there. But he ended up getting base hits both at bats that game. And ironically, again, everything he touches is gold. The A's scored like 12 runs in the last 2 innings and won the game. They won like by a run or something, and he was the star. Of course, he was the star. But he only played in 10 games that season, so he didn't see a lot of time. He was mostly on the bench. And then I feel like they decided, hey, he's got some promise, but he needs to play regularly, right? That was probably a good move. So they sent him to, I think he was in Portland in 26, maybe 27. I can't recall. But yeah, and then they brought him back in 28. And he had a couple of seasons where he was kind of, 240, 260 kind of average. But then, he figured it out. And he had 5 years where he was the 280, 290 kind of a hitter, and his real strength, though, was he could throw out runners. That was his real strength as a catcher. That, and of course, in a catcher, you want somebody that's kind of the quarterback, if you will, of the defense. And he was a born leader, great with the pitchers, gun for an arm. solid bat, good backstop. So, you can see why somebody like Connie Mack really was rooting for him to do well.
Yeah, he went to Portland in the PCL in 1926, and AAA did okay, not great. I mean, he played in 99 games, 292 at bats, and hit 236. The following season, 1927, he was in single A ball playing for Dallas, Texas League. Again, like 330 or something. But my gosh, he hit 330. So then he's off to Boston in the American League. Tell us again, for those who didn't listen, about the 1925 Pottsville Maroons. What makes them such a famous team, and Charlie's contribution to that team? Because out of his Major League Baseball career and out of his National Football League career, he only won one championship, and it was that 1925 NFL season. Sort of won a championship.
Yeah. So Doc Striegel, who was the owner of the Maroons, he wanted the Maroons to play in the NFL. They had played in the local, what they called the coal region or the anthracite league in the Pottsville area before that. But his vision was he wanted Pottsville to be big time. And so he was building up that team. He was bringing in NFL players, and he was bringing in superstars. But he had this idea that the NFL game at that point was very much a defensive game, lots of 0-0 ties, runs up the middle, very traditional, kind of old school, 3 yards in a cloud of dust kind of an offense. And Doc Striegel he felt like if he could build an offense that had more variety, people that could get around the ends from the backfield, quarterback that, managed the game, could throw the ball, had some ends that could catch the ball, that he could really do some damage in the NFL. And he was right. The Maroons that season ended up going 10-2, and they defeated the Chicago Cardinals late in the season to take over first place in the NFL. But then they had a bit of a controversy. There was a controversial exhibition game that they played in. They got in trouble with the league, and the league suspended them. And because of that, they were never awarded the championship. And it's still 100 years later, still being debated, still being discussed. I was in Pottsville last week for a book signing for my book, and everybody's still talking about it. Everybody's still cranky, 100 years later. But that's what happened. But Charlie Berry was instrumental on that team. First of all, he showed up late because, he had to get permission from Connie Mack to play football. He was under contract with the A's. And Doc Striegel, the owner of the Maroons, had approached Charlie while he was still in college and really wanted Charlie to play for the team. That was part of his strategy to open up the game, and he needed some ends that could really stretch the field when needed. But Charlie had to get permission. He went to Connie Mack. Connie Mack said, yeah, I'll let you play, but you can't leave until the season's over. You got to stick through the baseball season. So Charlie was late reporting. He had to wait for the season. Same thing in 26. He couldn't report until after the Portland finished its season. So he missed some games up front in the season, both years he played in the NFL. But, and I mentioned it in the podcast we did before, classic Charlie Berry. He shows up, he starts taking charge and just, doing Charlie Berry kind of leadership things. And 2 weeks into the season, Duke Osborne, who was the captain of the Maroons, he had played on 3 straight NFL championship teams. In fact, if the Maroons had won the championship and still had that, he would be one, I guess, maybe the only. I don't know if anybody's ever been on 4 straight NFL championship teams before. Some have won 4 or more, I know, like Charles Haley and others. But I don't know if they were consecutive. Duke Osborne was on the 22 Canton Bulldogs, 23 Canton Bulldogs, 24 Cleveland Bulldogs, all of which won the NFL championship. So he was a 3-time All-Pro as well.
Go back, if you include the All-America Football Conference, then you would have it because you had all those guys from the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Yep.
That
Cleveland would break that. Yeah, no doubt. But anyway, so they got, Charlie gets to Pottsville. He starts practicing, he starts playing, and he's a star from day one. I mean, some of the highlights, against Green Bay that year, one of the better teams, he scored 3 touchdowns. He kicked a field goal. He kicked all the extra. He pretty much scored all the points in the game. He won the exhibition game against the Notre Dame All-Stars with the last, field goal in the fourth quarter. He was All-Pro, first team All-Pro in both his rookie season, 1925 and 26. And he led this league in scoring in 25. Probably would have led the league in scoring in 26 if he had kicked in 26. I don't know why he didn't kick in 26. He kicked field goals and extra points in 25. He did not kick in 26. But 2 weeks into the season, Duke Osborne stands up in a meeting of the players and he says, I'm stepping down as captain. Charlie Berry is our captain. And, I've been there 2 weeks and he's right out of college, right? That just shows you what, just the impact he had on people and the teams he played for.
Why did he only play 2 years of professional football?
That is an age-old question. But my thought is, one is, as you know, the pay wasn't very good. The Maroons weren't great at paying their players either. They had some financial difficulties, and he might have gotten a little tired of that. He also got that coaching opportunity that popped up. And I think he was, college graduate, economics major. I think he was thinking long-term about family and about, I can't play forever. Football's a rough game. How many years do I have in this sport? I don't get paid much. Maybe I should try coaching. Maybe I should move towards something a little bit, more sustainable. And so, that next season was when he shifted over and took that coaching job at Grove City College. And I feel like it was an economic decision and maybe save his body decision. He was married at that time. He got married in 25, I believe it was. Maybe his wife was like, come on, Charlie, we gotta start going towards something longer term because you're not gonna be able to do this forever, You
used the term, I think you used the term rugged.
Yeah.
What was football like in the 1920s? It was not an easy game to play.
No.
It was tough. We see the way they hit today and how tough it is today. But back in the 1920s, what happens on the field today is, at least from what I've read and researched, is nothing like how tough it was back in the 1920s.
Yeah, no doubt. They were truly 60-minute players. The rules back then, you didn't have, substitutions like you do today where you could just sub people in and out. There were rules around it. I believe at that time, if you left, you couldn't come back for at least a quarter. And they only had 17 or 16 people on the roster. So, do the math, more than half your team's on the field. You don't have a lot of flexibility. And so, people stayed on the field for the whole game for the most part. Rosters were thin as well. The backups, maybe, the Maroons were pretty stacked, but a lot of teams, the drop off was pretty great. And now also the rules back then was, now today, if somebody hits you and you touch your knee or touch your elbow, you're down, right? That's not the way it was in the 20s. You had to be held down to be down. And so that, if you got knocked down, people get back up and keep running. If you got knocked down, but the guy didn't have a hold of you, you just crawl forward. And that meant other people would pile on. So, pile-ons were huge. Late hits weren't called. There were only a couple of referees on the field for most games. And so, distract them over there, slug the guy in front of you, right? Some of that stuff, bite the guy in front of you, kick the guy in front of you. They were doing anything possible to win. And if the referee wasn't looking, bummer for them, right? And there weren't a lot of them out there with eyeballs on the game. So, it was pretty tough. Helmets were leather, not a lot of padding. just, they were tough guys for sure.
What about baseball? How did baseball differ back then?
Baseball? Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously at that point they were coming out of the dead ball era. I think the game was starting to mature into something more like today. But, you hear a lot of stories about, plays at the plate. I mean, for a catcher, plays at the plate were pretty brutal. They were given a lot of latitude to hit. There was no rule that you had to avoid if the ball wasn't there or anything like that. And, no rules about the catchers got right in the baseline and they blocked that plate. And there's a great story about Babe Ruth, playing against Charlie. I think it was when he was with the White Sox, and there was a fly ball to center. Babe's on third. He tags up and he comes rolling home. Babe's a big dude. Charlie Berry's a football player, though, right? And I don't think the ball had even gotten there yet, but they were on a collision course. And Charlie lowered his shoulder and flipped Babe right over his body, did a cartwheel. He landed on the plate and he was safe because Charlie didn't have the ball yet. But the story goes, after that inning, Babe went out to the outfield and basically he got out there, then he just fell down and he collapsed. And they had to carry him off the field. He has a leg injury. He was out for 2 or 4 weeks because of the collision with Charlie. And Babe was a pretty big dude. The funny part was they asked Babe in the hospital, they're like, do you hold anything against Charlie Berry for that, for that hit? And he was like, no. He goes, that's what we get paid to do. He goes, I would have done the same thing. He goes, his classic quote was, baseball isn't ladies ping pong, So, which I thought was a great quote. So, yeah, I mean, he was tough. He was only 185 pounds, 6 foot, but, football mentality, tough as nails at the plate, which I'm sure, all the managers loved as well because he would block and he would take on anybody.
What kind of he never really was a full-time baseball player. He always played about half the games. Tell us a little more about his game.
Yeah, so I think his best year was 31. That was what I consider the pinnacle. That's when I think he played in 111 games that season. That was the most he ever played. Of course, a catcher's a pretty demanding position. So I'm guessing that with all the collisions and whatnot, they tended to swap and rotate catchers a little more than they probably do today. He drove in 49 runs. He scored 40 or 41. He batted 283, something like that. That was his pinnacle year, really. Yeah, next year I think he batted a little bit better. He might have gotten up to 290, but he played less, and then he dropped off pretty quick. I kind of liken it to, the NFL today, running backs, if they get 5 years in, it's a miracle. Some of them, they hit a wall and they drop off pretty because it's so severe. And I got to imagine being a catcher in that era when you've got people barreling down on you and trying to take you out and you're blocking plates. You got people sharpening their spikes and coming in spikes first. You probably wore him down because he dropped off pretty quick. And then he was definitely a sub for the kind of second half of his career. If you look at his numbers, he didn't play full time.
He had 267 with 23 home runs, 256 ribbies. I mean, it's not like he was an awful ball player. I mean, those are good numbers. I mean, that showed that he played. He played for 11 years.
Yep, especially for catchers, I think. Catchers at that era, defense was more important, from a position. And he had a gunner for an arm, as mentioned, and he was great at blocking the plate. He was a football player, so I think they liked that about him.
When did he start showing an interest in possibly becoming a Major League Baseball umpire? And talk about that transition and how that came about.
Yeah, so he Connie Mack wanted him to be a manager, and as his career started to wind down, Connie Mack gave him some opportunities to do some managing. First, he was an assistant for the A's. He worked with the catchers and pitchers. He was still playing, I believe, that first year, so he was kind of player coaching it. But Connie Mack was clearly grooming him to become a manager in their franchise. And in fact, the next year, one of their minor league teams, the team in Wilmington, got off to a bad start. And partway through the season, Connie, who also owned the A's, we know, off and on, he fired the manager, and he asked Charlie Berry if he'd go down to Wilmington and take over that team. And of course, Charlie turned it around. They didn't win, but they took second in their league. So had a great kind of second half of the season and made great strides. And I really think Connie Mack was hoping to convince Charlie to stick it out as a manager. And he saw that as his future. One of the things they asked Charlie about being an ump, and why did you decide to be an umpire or a head linesman? What was it about being a referee that you enjoyed? And with a smirk on his face, he said, the reality is the ump is always right. So, I think he liked being in that position. One thing he also said was that he always studied the rules, right? He wanted to be that player, whatever the sport was, that understood the rules, probably so he could also go up against the boundaries of the rules. And so he studied the rule book. When he was an umpire and a referee, he said that every morning when he got up, he pulled out rule books and he read rules. And he said that he felt like a good umpire in baseball or a good referee in football ought to be able to recite word for word the entire rule book, which is pretty impressive if you can think about it. So he was very studious and took the rules very seriously. And I think that made him think, maybe this is a good, direction. He was actually a football official before a baseball official, when he was still managing in the minors in baseball. He was refereeing high school and college games on the side in the fall. And then he applied to the NFL, and in 41, he got, within a year, he was selected to be in the NFL. At that same time, he resigned as manager of the baseball team, and he applied for and became an umpire in the Eastern League. He got quickly promoted to the International League, and within a year, he was in the NFL and the MLB, as an umpire and a head linesman. So he rocketed through that process, and then was there for 20 years in both sports. So
he was a head linesman in the NFL for 24 seasons, and he was an umpire in the American League. Remember back then you had American League umpires, you had National League umpires.
National League.
He was an American League umpire from 1942 until 1962.
Yep.
Was he just a professional sports guy? Did he have any other career? What did he do when he wasn't playing ball? That was it.
Yeah. I mean, he was, lecture scene, banquet circuit, off season. But he was making his, you think about it, if he was going to spring training, what's that, February, March, you're tied up through September, then football goes through mid-December. You get a couple of down months of banquets and other things like that. But no, I believe that was his entire career. He once said that he was fortunate because from the time he left college until he retired, he did something he enjoyed. He said he liked being a referee as much as he liked playing, and got a lot of satisfaction out of that. And then he did transition after he got up in age to being an assistant to the supervisor for umpires in the American League. And in that role, he went around, he scouted umpires to see who the next set would be that would come up through the ranks. He inspected fields, made sure that teams were taking care of the fields, and there wasn't any kind of danger. And he did some of that. He also did some travel. In World War II, he volunteered to go overseas and be part of some of the exhibitions that happened. He gave clinics on being umpires to people overseas in the Army and other services that were involved in the sports teams over there. And he did that after World War II as well. He went to Japan, he went to Germany. So, yeah, he was a busy guy, you could say. All sports, though. Everything was sports related for him.
Love it. What was he considered, I guess, if you're a Major League Baseball umpire for 20 plus years. He like I said, he umpired in Major League Baseball from 42 until 62. And as you noted, then he became an umpire, a supervisor. And then in 1970, during the strike in the postseason, he actually came back and worked one of the in the American League Championship Series.
He did.
And then, he was in the NFL for 20 plus years too.
Yep.
How is he thought of as an official in both of those leagues, especially by those who he played with previously?
Yes, highly respected. Highly respected. One is, as mentioned, he knew the rules inside and out. The other thing that I thought was interesting, he has this great quote about how he would make his calls. And he always said that in order to make a good call in any sport, there's some key things you have to do. One is you have to be in the right position. So understanding where to be for any situation, whether it's baseball or football, you have to be in the right spot. And he knew where to go. Two is, he said a lot of umpires will anticipate what's happening. So if it looks like the guy's going to be out by 2 feet, they're already thinking in their minds, I'm ringing this guy up. Barry said, you never do that. You watch the entire play all the way through. Guy might slide by the base, whatever. You do not do a thing or make any assumptions until you see the entire play and you're sure it's over. And then you make a quick, decisive decision, because nobody wants you to sit and think about it, But he said if you do that, you gain the respect of the players and the managers, because they know that you are watching the play, you're in the right position, and you know why somebody was either safe or out, or somebody was down, or they scored or they didn't score. So he had a lot of respect in the league. Plus, as you mentioned, I mean, shoot, he was the head linesman for 12 NFL championship games, 5 World Series, college all-star games. Like, he just was, he was clearly one of the best in the business. And there's a couple of umpires that came up late in his career that, they said in interviews that they really saw him as a mentor. They saw him as someone that, they could learn the craft from. And I think he was very well respected.
There's one other guy who did both, who basically did the same thing that Charlie did, and that's Cal Hubbard. He played both leagues, and he officiated in both leagues. But while he did that, I don't think anybody had as colored a career as an official in both sports as Charlie did. I mean, when I look at this, he several no-hitters. He was the umpire for several no-hitters, including Bob Feller's first no-hitter, if I read that correctly. He officiated in 12 NFL championship games, including the greatest game ever played, 5 World Series, 5 All-Star games. I mean,
incredible.
Think about all he did, I mean,
Yeah.
Don Larson's perfect game. Talk about some of the games that he was a part of as an official in both sports.
Yeah. Well, the biggie in football, of course, was the 58 NFL championship, the greatest game. And he was instrumental in the outcome of that game, too. Some people don't realize, late in the game, the Giants were winning. And literally it was 3rd down and short. And all they needed to do to win that game was get a first down. And they were going to pretty much run out the clock and going to be NFL champs. It would have not been so dramatic of an ending if that had happened. So the Giants lined up. They give the ball to Frank Gifford. Of course, he's the money back. Frank Gifford hits the line. It's close. Charlie Berry runs in as the linesman. He spots the ball. Giants are jumping up and down. That's a horrible spot. This is terrible. You don't have any. What's your problem, ref? Your eyes are yelling and hollering, and they're short. Because of that, they punt. Johnny U takes the ball all the way down. They score, tie it up, takes it all the way down in overtime. They win the game. Greatest game ever. What's interesting is that the Giants complained about that for 50 years, that they got robbed out of that game, and it was Charlie Berry's fault. In the 50th anniversary of that game, ESPN pulled the footage and used, modern technology to slow it down and spot the ball. And in the end, they surmised that, of course, Charlie Berry got it right. Their analysis 50 years later said, yep, Frank Gifford was short. Charlie Berry did not screw that play up. So, that's a pretty impactful game. On the baseball side, you mentioned Feller and Larson and all that good stuff. Charlie Berry was also the involved in what was almost another perfect game, which was, one pitcher took a perfect game into the ninth, 2 outs in the ninth, and somebody hit a ball down the first base line, and Charlie had to call it fair. It was a fair ball just inside the line, cost the guy a perfect game. He made the right call down the first base line, but that was another memorable game for him. He also, a lot of people mention that he's the only person that ever, was an umpire in a World Series game and a official in an NFL championship game in the same year. Someday, maybe somebody could.
1958 Stadium between the Milwaukee Braves and the New York Yankees, and then the Baltimore Colts and the New York Giants. He was an official for both championship games in one season. I mean, the only man ever to do that. It's just crazy.
I guess it's possible somebody could tie that record, but the record they can't tie now is that same season, he was also the head linesman for the college all-star game, where the college all-stars played the NFL champs like they used to do up until the late 70s. That game is gone. They don't play that game anymore, so nobody can ever tie that record of all three of those in the same game. One cool controversial thing was one season Charlie was an umpire in the American League, and he was scheduled to ump a game between the White Sox and the Indians. But he was asked to officiate the college all-star game, also going on in Chicago that night. And he really wanted to do that. And so he approached the American League and said, hey, would it be okay if I miss this game? I can't really do both. He did do both, by the way, a couple of times. He did a, afternoon game and then a night game in the other sport. He did do that a few times, but this time I guess he couldn't pull it off logistically. And the American League said, yeah, no, that's fine. You can miss the game. What's interesting though is they didn't replace him. They just went with one less official, and the Indians lost on a controversial call made by the umps, and their Bill Vack, of course everybody knows Bill Vack, Indians owner protested the game because, quote, Charlie Berry wasn't there to the American League. He blamed it on Charlie Berry because he wasn't there and there was less officials. American League said, yeah, no, you lost. Go home. But that was kind of an interesting little tidbit.
Well, I'm going to toot my own horn here. You mentioned the College All-Star Game. I wrote a book about it. It's coming out in June of 2026 called The College All-Stars versus the NFL Champions, the Chicago Charities football games of 1934 to 1976. So I know a little bit about that series. Yeah.
I bet you do. And I'm sure you wrote up the last game, which was a show. I watched it as a kid, and I remember that mess of a game.
Yeah, the Steelers and the All-Stars, they never finished the game.
Nope.
In your view, how talk about his legacy? It's like, how can a guy like this not be better known?
Yeah. Well, some of we call it recency bias, right? I mean, you see it out there. People are always posting like top 10 running backs of all time, top 10 quarter. And it's like everybody that's played in like the last 10 years. It's like nobody, and I think baseball's a little bit better about glorifying its past. But, nobody knows who Charlie Berry is. I bet if you asked major league players today, not anyone in either sport would know who Charlie Berry was or is. I mean, he was so long ago at this point. So that's part of the problem. Now he's still remembered in certain circles, right? I mean, he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. He's in the Lafayette Hall of Fame. He's in the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame. He did get a couple votes as an umpire for the, Baseball Hall of Fame, by the way, a few times. Never got elected, though. But, so he's known through those things. He was at the end of the 20th century, Phillipsburg High School in New Jersey, where he went to and, racked up those 11 varsity letters. And their big game every year is against Easton High School, which is right across the river in Pennsylvania. They've been playing for like 116 years or something like that. It's one of the longest football rivalries. And Charlie Berry single-handedly won at least 2 of the games when he was in high school against Easton, like scored all the points and just ran. But he was voted at the end of the 20th century one of the top 15 athletes from Phillipsburg High School for the entire century. So somebody there remembers him, right? And probably that legacy at the high school level lives on. But nobody seems to remember much about Charlie Berry and his pro career, unfortunately, or his umpiring, unfortunately, today.
Well, we try to do our best here to tell people a little bit about Charlie Berry. And Jeff, I want to thank you so much for joining me again on Sports Forgotten Heroes. Thrilled you were here, and this was a fun discussion.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. This was a blast.
Anytime. For his career, Charlie played for the Philadelphia Athletics, the Boston Red Sox, the Chicago White Sox, and in the NFL, the Pottsville Maroons. He was an umpire in 5 different World Series, 5 All-Star games, multiple no-hitters, and was the head linesman in 12 NFL championship games. An amazing career. Thanks again to my guest today, Jeffrey Payne, and thanks to all of you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on Sports Forgotten Heroes.
The Sports History Network, where legends live on and the past plays loud. Welcome to the place where history's proud. From gridiron glory to the hardwood stars, from the racetrack heat to Olympic bars. It's the voices, the stories, the moments you miss, told by fans and pros who live for this. Hook and Themic, the Sports History Network, where the past comes alive. Podcasts and blogs that keep the flame high. From Babe to Brady, Alley to the Dome, if it's history and sports, sports, then this is the home. SportsHistoryNetwork.com, the headquarters of sports yesteryear.